Okay, so guys, today we're going to follow this schedule. First, I'm going to go through some of the basics that all of you guys, if you're studying in Canada and you're graduating, that you need to know. And we do this every session. And then afterwards, we are going to go into the special presentation that I have today about low-skilled work. Most of the time, low-skilled work, it's very difficult to get permanent residence, but there are a few special programs that could allow you to get permanent residence, and we're going to talk about that. We do have all of these sessions recorded and on Devon's YouTube site. So if you're interested in other topics, last time I think we covered OIMP. We also talked about what to do if your points aren't high enough for express entry, spousal sponsorships, and all of those interesting topics that you might be interested in. Check out our YouTube, the Devon YouTube channel. All right, so let's start with, first of all, extending your status. First of all, as an international student or a foreign worker in Canada, you have a work permit or study permit, and that has a limit on it. There's an expiry date on it. Okay, so make sure you take a look at that expiry date and you know exactly when, and you note it on your calendar. You have 3 reminders on it. If when your study permit is going to expire, if you filed an extension just before it expires, okay? Now the IRCC website says, oh, you should file 30 days before. That is a recommendation only. It's not the law. The law is as long as you file it while before it expires, even the day of, you are able to stay in Canada until a decision is made. That status that you have in between the time that your work permit or study permit has expired, and before you get your new work permit or study permit, that status is called implied status or maintained status. Okay, and you're able to continue on and remain. It depends on which application you have and which document you have, which application you're submitting, but you can say studying or working in Canada until a decision is made. Okay, now you can only do this if you've submitted your application properly. By properly, it means that you've submitted the right forms, you paid the right fees, and you have pressed that button and submitted it, and actually submitted it online. Okay, if you don't do it properly, then your status actually ends on the document date, and it's as if you have not even submitted the application. Restoration timelines. If you somehow forgot to extend your status on time, or you lost your status, let's say you get a negative decision, then your clock starts running, and you have 90 days from the time that you've lost your status to file a restoration of status if you're still in Canada during that time. Okay, and now the difference between being on while waiting for your restoration of status and being on implied status is implied status, you can continue on. You have legal status in Canada. You may be able to continue on to study or work. When you're waiting for the restoration of status, you don't have status in Canada. You can stay waiting for it, but you cannot work or study during that time. Okay. All right, let's talk about studying and working while you have your study permit. You have to actively pursue your studies. That means that you lose your status after 90 days, okay? If you do not actively, you don't go to classes, you're not enrolled as a full-time student, etc. Okay. Now, there are 2 exceptions to the rule. One is if it's a scheduled break. That means everybody in the program has the same break. It's on the academic calendar. During those scheduled breaks, you are still actively pursuing studies, and you can work full-time during those scheduled breaks. That's okay. Now, authorized leave is a much more personal situation. Authorized leave happens when, let's say you have a personal situation where, let's say you're sick and for a semester, you get really bad COVID or something like that, and you can't study. So you can go to the school and ask them for authorized leave to take that entire semester off. You can only get authorized leave up to 150 days. So think of it as a semester, okay? And if you can get the authorized leave from the school, then that time period, you're not going to lose your status if you can get the authorized leave, okay? Now, working while you are studying. First of all, you can only work while you are a full-time student. If you're a part-time student, you're not allowed to be working. If you're not enrolled as a student, like if you're on authorized leave, for example, you're not allowed to be working. The only exception to the rule is if it's in the last semester. If it's in the last semester, you're a part-time student, you can work even if you're a part-time student, and only in the last semester. Now, once you've completed your studies, and you get the first indication from the school that you've completed your studies, then you have to stop working, okay? Because you're no longer a student at that time. You can't work part-time or full-time anytime. You have to stop working. The only exception to the rule is if you have graduated from one program and you're going to start another program, you've already been accepted to the new program, and that new program is starting in less than 150 days, so within one semester, then in that situation, you are able to work in between those programs. Let's talk about the post-grad work permit. So first of all, should you apply for a post-grad work permit? It really depends on your plan because you only get one post-grad work permit in your lifetime. So don't waste it, okay? Let's say, for example, you're finishing your undergrad and then you've already been accepted to the master's and you're going to do your master's. Should you apply for your post-grad work permit after your undergrad? Probably not, because in that situation, you're going to be studying in a master's and you're not going to be really working. And even if you worked, if you're a full-time student, the work experience doesn't really count for express entry. So you probably shouldn't be doing just applying just for the sake of applying because you qualify. You have to really have a good plan as to how you're going to use this precious, precious open work permit that you only get once in a lifetime. You should also take a look at how long you can get it. Now, recently, if you have a master's, you can get a 3-year, no matter what length. But for all the other programs, if you have a program of, less than 2 years, 8 months to, let's say, 16 months, your work permit will only be for that length of time, right? If it's 2-year or more, you get a 3-year work permit, and you can combine your programs. If you do a 1 year plus another 1 year, then you get a 3-year work permit. Distance education. So if you have, back during the COVID times, they were talking about giving you some leeway, and there were special rules for COVID times. Now we're reverting back to the normal times, and normally you cannot have long distance education, meaning online education for more than 50% of your program. If you do, you don't qualify for the post-grad work permit. Finally, there is such a thing as maintaining your full-time status for every single semester except the last semester. If you don't maintain full-time student status in every single semester, then you would not qualify for the post-grad work permit. So even let's say you're doing quite badly on one semester, right? Even if you do quite badly in one semester and you're going to fail some courses, as an immigration lawyer, I would advise you to keep on going. Don't drop your courses so that you become a part-time student. If you do, you'll have to probably do another program in order to qualify for the post-grad work permit. I would rather see that F on your transcript, showing that you were at least pursuing your studies and you were enrolled as a full-time student in every semester. Okay, so the only exception to the full-time status is the authorized leave, when you take the entire semester off with the permission of the school, or the last semester when you can be a part-time student and still qualify for the postgrad work permit. So finally, when should you apply for the postgrad work permit? I'm going to give you a timeline that is different from what you normally see on the IRCC website. The timeline that I'm telling you is 90 days from the date that you first receive notice that you have completed your program, and when your study permit is still valid, whichever comes first. 90 days only. The IRCC website says 180 days. Now you can apply for a postgrad work permit within 180 days, but after the 90 days, you lose your student status. So you have to file a restoration of student status in order to do so. And you won't be able to work while waiting for your work permit if you apply after 90 days. Now, recently, the government has said that you can no longer go to the border and flagpole for your postgrad work permit, which means most of you will be applying for your postgrad work permit inside Canada. Inside Canada is now taking 3 to 4 months at least for these work permits to be processed. And I think probably most of you will want to have the option to work while waiting for your work permit, right? So if that's the case, when you apply for your postgrad work permit, make sure that you are applying while your study permit is still valid and within 90 days of receiving the notice from the school that you have completed your program. Let's quickly take a look at a timeline. Okay, let's say you're still writing your final exams, okay? If you're still writing your final exams, you're a full-time student, you can work at that time. Okay, let's say you're waiting for results. Still a student, you can work at that time. Now, the school has notified you, okay, you have completed your program. Are you a student then? No, you are not. At that point, you have to stop working. Now, if you submit your postgrad work permit within 90 days of the program completion and your study permit is still valid, at that point, you can start working. You can start working full-time. All right, so now let's talk about permanent residence for low-skilled work, okay? What do I mean by low-skilled? I'm putting in brackets low-skilled because this is a government term, and I don't particularly like how they say it's low-skilled. I think the government, the way that they have classified things as high-skilled and low-skilled is often quite biased. And I think a lot of work that they have termed to be low-skilled is actually quite skillful. It's most of those jobs I won't be able to do if I don't have training in it. And so, you know, I don't really like this classification, but I'm not the government, and the way that the immigration system is set up is that they go by this NOC codes, the NOC codes, like it's the Holy Bible. And so basically, when we are working with any sort of applications in the economic streams, one of the main things we have to first look at is what occupation does your work fall under, okay? So I've put a link here where you can see you can go in and check out the NOC codes. And so what the government has done is they have classified all of the occupations, and you know, even though it's not possible for them to say, you know, to really classify all occupations, but we have to try to pigeonhole what you do and the work you do in one of these kind of occupations, okay? And basically, they have classified it into 6 different tiers, TEERs. So the tier 0, which is management, tier 1, which is occupations they usually require university degrees. Tier 2 is occupations requiring normally college programs, and tier 3 are more of the trades. Okay, those are going to be high skilled. Then the others that are not in those, they're tier 4 or tier 5, they're going to be low skilled. Okay, and when you're looking at these occupations, it's not necessarily about what the position is called. I can be called a president. I can call myself a president, but if what I'm doing is, you know, cleaning the floors and mopping and, you know, whatever, and what I'm doing is actually janitorial, you know, things, then they look at what I do and they'll say I'm a janitor and not a president. Okay, so it really depends on what it is, the duties that you do. The other thing you have to pay attention to are employment requirements. If the employment requires listed for the occupation code says something is usually required, usually it's not all the time. So that's not mandatory. But if they say is required, then if you don't have that, then you may be at issue, like you may not, the officer may find that you are not actually working in that occupation. For example, in order to work as a lawyer, you must have a law degree. So if you did not, if you did not graduate from law school, you can say, well, I'm doing all the lawyer work, but you cannot call yourself a lawyer, and your work would not be deemed to be that of a lawyer. Okay. So now, why is this occupation code so significant? It's because for the most part, in Canadian law, the law is very skewed to be against low-skilled work. If you're looking at programs such as express entry, the only work experience that is counted is high-skilled work. If you're looking at most of the provincial nominee programs, the only work experience that is counted is mostly high-skilled work. Now, some of the provinces, some of the Atlantic provinces, some of the other provinces, they have now done away with this distinction. And some of the provinces are saying, yes, we want to allow, it doesn't matter to us what the government says, high skilled, low skilled. If you have a job offer, that's good enough for us, okay? The government is moving more towards that way. But for the most part, a lot of the programs, especially express entry is the big one, they still want to see high skilled work. So today we're going to talk about low skilled work, and I'm going to talk about one of the provincial nominee programs, which is in Ontario, that is called the in-demand stream. So in Ontario, the provincial nominee program is such that if it's not an express entry stream, you still have to enter into the Ontario pool. And different, depending on which stream it is, you're entering only into the pool for that stream, okay? And things like different criteria count. So for example, if you have a job offer, for example, in Northern Ontario, you will get more points. There are no points, for example, allocated to age. So it's a very different kind of allocations compared to express entry. The draws, they happen a few times a year. There's no real announcement ahead of time. There's no real set order as to when each draw happens. They kind of occur randomly when the government feels like it, okay? And so there are different kinds of points that they're based on. So today I wanted to talk about the in-demand stream, and this is one of the only ones in the only one in Ontario right now that allows people to apply when they are having a low-skilled job. So in order to qualify, first of all, the employer needs to qualify. So the employer, if they're outside of the GTA, they have a job. They have to have a gross income of over 500,000. If it's inside GTA, they have to have a income of over $1 million. If they outside of GTA, they also have to have at least 3 full-time Canadian or permanent resident employees. And I made a mistake here. It's supposed to be if they're inside the GTA, they should have 5 full-time and permanent resident employees. Okay. And they have to be in business in Ontario for at least 3 years. Now, for the job offer, they have to have a permanent, which means no end date. Okay. Sometimes employers call permanent employees permanent, and it has a different kind of meaning. What permanent means is that you're not on a specific end date contract where you're hired for only a year, for example. There's no end date. It's an indeterminate job offer. Okay. They have to be at least full-time job, so at least 30 hours a week. And the occupation has to be on the in-demand list. So Ontario has 2 in-demand lists. One is for everyone, anywhere in Ontario. And the other list of occupations is only for people outside of the GTA. What kind of jobs are on there? Well, there's a lot of manufacturing jobs, especially outside of the GTA. There are farm worker jobs. There are some personal support worker jobs, but only for those where you're not working in a nursing home. You're working for someone inside their home. If you're working for someone in a nursing home, then that is normally high-skilled work. Okay, but if you're working for someone in their own home, then they say that that's low-skilled work. So that would fall within the in-demand stream. Your salary needs to meet median wage. And so if you were to so you have to take a look at the median wage for the occupation in the location. Okay. Now, as for the applicant, if you wanted to apply for this, what qualities do you need to have? First of all, the work experience is very important. If you want to work and apply under this particular occupation on the in-demand list, then you have to have at least 9 months of work experience in the last 3 years in this occupation in Ontario. If you have that, you just need to pass an English or French level of 4, which is very low, and have a high school diploma. So this kind of, stream could work for you, but it could also, for example, work for your spouse. If they're working and they want to find, they have a job as well. Okay. What's good about this stream is the competition is not as high in that the points, for example, it's, there's not that many people who apply under this stream. So if you put yourself in the stream, you could very well get invited to apply when they select people quite easily. The other thing about this, again, is this no requirement for the high skilled. If you can do the low skilled, but you have to, the occupation is very specific. Also, another thing about this is the timeline is quite long. So in order to get first you have to wait to be invited to apply. Once you're invited to apply and you submit your application, then it takes maybe 3 to 6 months for the government of Ontario to make a decision. And after they make a decision, you will get a provincial nomination. Now, with that provincial nomination, you can apply to extend your work permit, but it will be an employer-specific work permit. So you can only work for this employer in this occupation. and you can apply for permanent residence with the federal government. And the federal government right now normally takes around 1.5 years before they actually issue the permanent residence. Until that time, you have to continue working in this position for the employer. Otherwise, your application will be denied. Okay. Now, there's one more stream I wanted to go over before we go into questions, and that's the caregiver program. Now, the caregiver program, there's not too much I can talk about, except that it's coming. So it closed in the end of June, and then the government announced that they're going to open it up later this year. Some of the details they were revealed, but a lot of the details are still unknown. So for example, they have said that you will need to have relevant work experience in order to qualify. What does that mean? We don't know yet. One of the things that we like to do is we want to put you guys who have registered for these webinars onto our list where we will send you news on immigration, such as news on caregiver programs or other programs when they are announced. So we'll be sending you news once this new program is announced. The other thing is just high school diploma is required. So if you have a spouse who has a high school and they have a benchmark of only 4, the English or French level of only 4. So these 2 things before they needed to have a post secondary program 1 year post, and they needed a CLB benchmark of 5. Those things have now been dropped for the new upcoming program. And finally, you have to have a job offer to take care of most likely children, elderly, or disabled people. Now, the new thing before, you had to be hired by the family or the individual to take for them to be your employer. Now the government has said the new program will be that you can now be hired by organizations as well, who will basically, say, okay, you go temp agencies, you go and work for this family, you go and work for this family. So that's quite interesting there. Okay. All right. Let's go in. Oh, okay. Before I go into that, let me just give you some practical pieces of advice. First of all, the laws do change a lot, but there is a particular underlying logic by the government as to what they want to do. And so it's important for you to have a plan as early as possible as to how you might be able to increase your chances and make sure that you can get permanent residence. It's never too early to plan. It can be too late to plan sometimes. Okay, so come and have a consultation so we can get that plan ready for you as early as possible. Even if you don't qualify for permanent residence yet, that's okay. It's good to know what you need to do in order to qualify. Once you have that plan, now it's about execution. Do you need to study extra hard for your IELTS? Do you need to make sure that you're doing the programs that you need to do in order to maximize your chances to get permanent residence? Maybe you need to study in another program in order to get the higher level of postgrad work permit. Maybe you don't. Make sure you know what you need to do, and then you have to do it. Third thing is make sure that you stay in status. That's one of the first things I talk to you about. And this is the first thing I talk to people every time I have these sessions. It's because it's so important. Once you fall into the trap where you are out of status, especially when you're out of restoration of status time, then you go into the sort of never land. And it is very, very difficult then to get you back on status and back into the situation where you can apply and qualify for permanent residence under economic streams. Also do not misrepresent. Right now, when it can be difficult to get permanent residence, it's often very tempting to listen to these fraudsters in the system who say, hey, you just need to do this. Don't worry, nobody will know. Pay me some money and I'll make it happen. All right. This can cause such chaos in your life. You may never be free of it. Even if you get your permanent residence somehow, or even if you get your citizenship afterwards somehow, you can still lose it. If IRCC one day, catches these fraudsters, raids their apartment, know who their client list is, and then they will come and take away your status. If you misrepresent, even if you're innocently misrepresenting, meaning you didn't purposely do it, you just left out a little detail about your work experience on your forms, for example. The officers can find that you misrepresented, and if they find that you misrepresented, you will be barred from Canada for 5 years. And forget about trying to get another study permit or work permit. They can also your credibility will be shot. It will be very difficult to get another study permit or work permit. Finally, if your application is rejected, contact a lawyer right away, okay? There are very, very strict deadlines to go and appeal or go for judicial review of your application. If your application is denied in Canada, inside Canada, it's only 15 days. Outside of Canada, it's 60 days. And also, maybe you say, oh, I don't want to go to court, but I'm going to write IRCC a letter and try to explain. Well, if you do that, and you don't really know what to write, and they look at it and they deny it, you can't then come to me and say, hey, Elizabeth, now can you help me? Because I will say, well, at that point, you've already had one reconsideration. IRCC won't even look at what I have because you're only allowed one reconsideration. And finally, timelines with regard to restoration of status, when you can apply for a postgrad work permit, etc., are very, very tight. So you cannot waste time doing that. So here is our firm's email, contact information. We have our social media up there. Feel free to contact us. And we offer Devant students. Let us know you've come to this webinar, you're a Devant student. We offer you guys a discounted rate of $100 for the consultation. Okay. All right. Let's get started on some questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. That was amazing as always and very informative. We do have lots of questions that have come in, and a reminder, we can only answer the questions that come in the Q&A, and we will be answering them in the order that they come in. We've got about 20 minutes left. We very likely won't be able to answer all of them, so we apologize in advance. And I did put in the chat the YouTube link to all of Elizabeth's previous sessions if you're looking for a session on a specific topic. And I've also put the website and the email and the telephone number that you can contact for that consultation. All right, so let's get started with the first question. I am a fresh graduate and I am planning to apply for OINP. I'm curious to know, will I get additional points for the second Canadian credentials? For example, I have a master's degree and a university teaching certificate from the university, which was a 1-year program.
Yes, I do believe that if you have your master's, then that does raise your points and it really depends on which stream. So if you're looking at the in-demand stream, they actually don't care about the education. So you won't have additional points. If you're applying for international student stream, yes, that could add points. So it depends on which stream that you're applying under. So we've talked about OINP specifically, just the OINP programs last time. So go and if you want to take a look at the YouTube.
Perfect. Okay. Next question is, I am on PGWP and want to invite my spouse to join me in Canada. First question, I currently have a tier 4 job. In this case, can I be eligible to invite my spouse on SOWP? And
Mhm.
question 2, for SOWP, who has to apply from my GC key or my spouse from her GC key?
So, the law was recently changed so that even if you have a low skill job, you are still able to have your spouse qualify for a open spouse's work permit. Now, in order to apply, she has to apply, not you apply. Okay, so normally if you're going to apply on your own, then she has to have her own account and apply on her account, not on your account.
Thank you. Hiral is working as a dental assistant part-time, though they have no equivalent degree in that field. Are they eligible to use that experience to apply for permanent residency?
Sorry, they're applying as a dental assistant.
Yes.
So it really depends on what it is, which program they're going to qualify under. Come and have a chat with us, and we will give you some ideas on what you can qualify for, and if you can't, what you need to do in order to qualify.
Okay. All right. This anonymous person is on a student visa, and they're wondering if I get a full-time job offer and I'm eligible for permanent residence, which requires a job offer letter. Can I apply for PR while on a student visa, and how will it affect my current visa status?
So eligible for a PR with a job offer letter, it just depends on which stream. You can certainly apply for permanent residence if you're a student and you qualify, you're selected. But be very careful as to what you mean by job offers. A lot of people think, for example, for express entry, that if you have a job offer, you have the 50 arranged employment points, and that's not the case. In order to have arranged employment points for express entry, you have to not only have a job offer from a Canadian employer, but you have to have an LMIA or an employer-specific work permit in order to get the 50 points. So come to us and we can certainly take a look at your situation and plan it out for you. And if you qualify for permanent residence, you can get invited to apply. Sure, why not? Certainly, you can do it in parallel with your studies.
All right, another anonymous question. This individual is studying full-time, but they're not in their final semester. Their official end date for this semester is August 16th. However, their professors have told them that there will be no classes after August 11th. So they're wondering if they can go back to their home country and stay for 20 days, and if this will have a negative impact on their study permit because they're leaving Canada technically before the official end of the semester.
Well, if your study permit is still valid, then you can go back, and if you need a visa to come back, or you need to make sure that you have the visa to return to Canada afterwards. The officers, when you come back to Canada, may be a little concerned if you've completed your program and you haven't yet applied for your postgrad work permit. They may be concerned as to what you're going to be doing in Canada, if your program has ended. So you may need to explain to them what exactly you will be doing in Canada, if you're going to study some more in another program, etc. So that's where, that's at, if you don't care about your postgrad work permit.
Right.
Mhm.
This question is quite broad. I'm not sure if they're talking about it from an immigration perspective or from a job search perspective, but they're wondering if their degrees from their home country are still of any use in Canada.
For the most part, not necessarily. A lot of programs, they look at your education background, and if you have your, bachelor's and master's, that certainly can be very valuable. It just depends on which program that you are applying for.
Right. Louise applied for the PGWP, and they hypothetically, if they applied for the PGWP, and if their study visa expires after 1 month of applying for the PGWP, will they have to leave Canada to wait for the decision on the application?
No, this is where that first slide when I talked about implied status matters. So if you apply while your study permit is still valid and you're still waiting for your postgrad work permit, then you can start working immediately, and you can continue to be in Canada and work even if your study permit has expired. Now, the thing is, be very careful about leaving Canada after your study permit has expired, or it's after the 90 days, and if you don't have your postgrad work permit yet. Because if you leave and you don't have status to come back to, if you leave and then when you come, even if you can come back, let's say you have a visitor visa, you can come back. You can't work. Your implied status is over. You won't be able to work until a decision is made and you get your new postgrad work permit. So if you're on implied status, my advice normally is to try to stay in the country and wait until your work permit is issued, but you can work while waiting for the work permit to be issued.
Amazing. All right. Dilip is a master's student in their third semester at the University of Windsor. They're wondering if they can apply for PR immediately after graduation and get PGWP.
You can certainly apply and get your postgrad work permit simultaneously and in parallel. I don't know if you yourself could qualify and apply for permanent residence. We can certainly talk about that. There is a master's program for OIMP, but it is very selective. And it's not that just because you graduated from master's, automatically you get to apply for permanent residence. And so we did talk about that last time in the last session. And certainly if you wanted to come for a consultation, we can look at your options.
Perfect. Thank you. Varsha is a postgraduate program full-time student with the January 2024 intake. Their spouse's visa unfortunately got rejected, and they're wondering if he can reapply for a spouse open work permit again, knowing that the spouse visa for postgraduate programs stopped after April 30th, but wondering if this will apply because she came in January.
So if your spouse does not have a work permit, then they fall under the new rules. And so, when you graduate, you have your postgrad work permit, then they can apply. But if they don't yet have a work permit, then they do fall under the new rules.
Right. Varsha also asked that as a postgraduate program student, can their spouse apply for open work permit once they get PGWP?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
All right. Anonymous question. If they apply for the federal skilled stream and will claim points from international work experience from working back home, is there an expiry for the certificate of employment with job descriptions? They plan to ask their COE from my employer before, but they will be applying for the federal skilled stream May 2025 once they graduate.
Yeah, as a general rule, we never ask employers to draft anything because they don't know what to write. And they will take a very long time trying to figure it out. Normally what happens is we as lawyers draft the letters for our clients and send it to the employers, have them review it, make sure it's accurate, and then have them sign it on their letterhead. Yeah, asking employers to draft their own letters is just a bad idea most of the time.
Right, very good to know. After getting a permanent residence from another province, is it necessary to live only in that province, or can they move to another province afterwards?
Right. So I think this person is talking about provincial nominee programs. So the way that provincial nominee programs work is the province has made an agreement with every province has made an agreement with the federal government so that the federal government allows the province to select a certain number of people each year. And there's always a quota for each province. Now, the provinces then, they very jealously guard the these spots and the people that they nominate. They want to make sure that people that they nominate will have the intention to stay in the province. So if you apply for permanent residence under a provincial nominee program, until you get permanent residence, you must show that you intend to be in that province, which means if you move to another province, that intention is very likely not going to show that you're going to, want to live in the first province, right? So that's going to be an issue, and your application, even if you've received the provincial nomination, you're still waiting for your permanent residence, your application can be denied. Now, after you get permanent residence, you do have the constitutional protected right to live in any province, anywhere you like in Canada as a permanent resident. And your intentions can change. And so, if you don't declare your intention before you land to live in another province. But if after you land and after you get your permanent residence, you decide you want to go to another province, yes, you can do that.
Okay. Obata would like to maximize their stay after graduation. How long can I postpone applying for the 1-year post-grad work permit if my study permit ends on September 30th, knowing that they got their final transcript on June 23rd?
How can they post? They have their. So it just really depends on your situation. Like I said, adhere to the deadline of 90 days. And while your study permit is still valid, 90 days after the first day that you receive notification from the school that you've completed your program. It's not going to be when you convocate. It's definitely going to be before you convocate. Normally, you'll get a letter or you'll get something in your portal. The first indication, your transcripts, the first indication that you've completed your program, that's when the clock starts running.
Okay. This person has a question about the caregiver program. They are currently on a student visa working with a caregiver agency part-time, and they want to give them a full-time work offer letter. So if they get that offer letter, can they be eligible for permanent residency in the caregiver pathway, even though they're still on a student visa? Would it break any study permit rule?
So, first of all, I don't know what the new caregiver program is going to require, and whether or not you could be eligible if you are a student. If you are eligible as a student, you still need to maintain your status until you get permanent residence. It could be that you may be able to get a work permit under the caregiver program, in which case you can apply for a work permit. A work permit doesn't necessarily negate a study permit. So if you wanted to continue to study and work, that is absolutely possible. But it really depends on, what the new requirements of the caregiver program is. If you were to apply for permanent residence and you get your permanent residence, of course, once you get your permanent, that trumps everything. Then you do whatever you like. But in the meantime, while you're applying, you need to make sure that you can work legally for the employer. Maybe you work for them part-time under your hours as a student, but if they want you to work full-time, you'll have to apply for a work permit.
Okay. This person is wondering that if they process their PR and their spouse is still not in Canada, does he still need to take the IELTS?
Well, it really depends on the program. So normally if you have a spouse, and you have a partner, by the way, spouse doesn't just mean someone you're married to. By spouse, I also include common law partners. So common law partners are people who you have lived together in a conjugal relationship for at least a year. And if you have that, make sure first of all, you're declaring them properly on all of your applications. What's your marital status? You're not single if you have a common law partner, you're common law, okay? Whether or not this person needs to do IELTS or not, it really depends on the situation.
Okay. Pravina is wondering if you could give some more information on the 35 Ontario PNP jobs, which were added recently.
So the in-demand stream jobs, they're on the website. If you Google in-demand stream, they're on the website, and you can take a look at those occupations there.
Yes. All right, we've got 5 more minutes. Time for some final questions. My classes will end on October 25th. Will I be eligible to apply for a 3-year post-graduation work permit after completing my 2-year master's program? There have been recent updates on the PGWP, and I'm currently working as a ground handler at the airport.
So even if you didn't do a 2-year, even if you did a 1-year master's program, you're now eligible for a 3-year post-grad work permit. So yeah, so you can, if you've done your master's, that's a good program to have to do it. Now, whether or not as a ground handler, I believe that could be a lower skill job. I'll have to double check whether or not how you might be able to get permanent residence. That's another matter. So do come and we can take a look at that.
Okay. Once we get PGWP, can we enroll in a 52-week training program?
I mean, the 52-week training program, if it is something which is not offered from a school, and it's, then it's for work, yes, you can certainly do that. If it is offered, if it's a program that's part of a school program, you still need a study permit in order to do that. So yeah, it depends on the situation. But once you have your postgrad work permit, don't waste it. If you are going to be doing full-time studies again, and your postgrad work permit is still valid, during that time, if you're a full-time student, you will not get points for your work experience for programs such as Express Entries, Canadian Experience Class, etc. So be very careful when you want to retrain after you've gotten your postgrad work permit. This is where the planning comes in. When is it a good time for you to study? When is it not a good time for you to study? Maybe you do part-time studies. So come and we'll talk about it, create a plan for you that makes it work for yourself.
All right. I think we will end it there. It is 7:58. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Everybody, please join me in thanking Elizabeth for spending her evening with us and answering your questions. I'm sorry if we did not get a chance to get to your question. I have posted in the chat the YouTube link to Elizabeth's previous sessions. And as always, we would definitely recommend you emailing or calling Long Mangalji Law Firm to book that $100 consultation. Remember to state that you came from the Devant workshop to get that $100 consultation cost.
Thank
All
you so
right.
much, Keelan.
Thank you so much.
Yes, it's always a pleasure to be here, guys. Do check us out. We have some exciting more sessions in the upcoming months. We normally do this every month. So looking forward to chatting with you guys again. Take care, guys.
Yes. Thank you. The next one is on August 28th, and you can find that on the Devant website. So we hope to see you then. Thanks so much, Elizabeth, and take care, everybody. Good evening.
Good night. Bye-bye.